So as our speaker is getting ready, we would like to go ahead with the award presentation for today. So first let me just quickly introduce myself. Hello everyone, I'm Swati. I'm the Honors and Awards Director for the AIAA San Francisco section. And some of you might have seen my emails requesting for nominations through these years. So this year we are giving out one award. So we ask for nominations in 6 categories every year. And this year we have the Leadership Award that we are giving out to Dr. Roger C. Strawn, whom you just heard from, and is a very, very accomplished person, and we are very happy to give this award to him this year. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do justice with his full list of accomplishments here, but he has been a pioneer in developing modeling and simulation capability for rotorcrafts over the years. For last 4 decades, as you can see, he has worked on several numerical methods, oversight grid methods, adaptive mesh refinement, and contributed to very standard solvers that are used for rotorcraft modeling, such as Helios and Fun3D. I have used Fun3D myself in the past, and I'm also familiar with some of the simulation capability that he has worked on, so I can relate to it. He's managed several of the Army's projects and has also led an internationally joint program called TTCP, the Technical Corporation Program, which span across multiple countries and continents. And his work has also impacted the Army's recent programs and applications like Para, Future Deck, Reconnaissance Aircraft. So with that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Strawn.
And all that's old stuff. I think the eVTOL air taxis is the real exciting thing, and hopefully a lot of you. There's one person in that area right now, but that's going to be really exciting, and I look forward to taking an air taxi from Palo Alto to San Francisco and back to go to the show.
Awesome.
All right.
That's very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so with that, I'll hand it over to Eric.
Okay. Small technical issue here. I'll be with you in 1 minute.
Perfect. I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
So you said you only in the last 8 years you could do computational fluid dynamics for rotorcraft.
Right.
Was that because of some technical breakthrough, or is it just GPUs or whatever just got fast enough?
Kind of both.
Okay.
It's just you have to get the structural dynamics coupled with the aerodynamics. You have to get rotating and stationary fuselage and rotating rotor blades. You have to get a lot of resolution to resolve the wake in the tip vortices. Just a real hard problem.
So 20 years ago, what would have been the constraint? What would have stopped you?
Resolving the rotor wake.
Okay.
And doing the interactions between the fuselage and the rotors. So kind of a combination of much faster computers and better algorithms that can take advantage of that.
Okay.
Do those models involve any machine learning for order reduction?
Yeah. So the next challenge. So I think what we can do now is if you give me a helicopter, we can assess the aerodynamic performance. But if you're going to design a helicopter, you want to assess 50,000 or 100,000 different design variables to optimize it. So you got to make things go a lot faster. You can't wait 3 days to get a solution. So we're using machine learning that is trained with the high fidelity solutions that can be used in design and optimization. So absolutely, that's the real big frontier right now. And the GPU computers are a big part of that.
Yes.
And if you know anyone who's interested in that area, we're looking to, always looking to hire great folks. So anybody in those areas.
Is that sort of contractor or is that, so how does that work?
It takes a long time to hire civil servants, so
Okay.
usually we bring people in as contractors and then convert. Also, contractors can often move around.
Right, okay. I assume it's like usual ITAR restrictions or not?
Military stuff, we do a lot of fundamental work as well.
So you could hire non-US citizens?
Green card.
Okay, at least green card, gotcha.
And the main issue with that is that you can't get onto the NASA Research Center without a 24/7 escort.
Right.
Oh, wow.
I actually escorted someone for about 9 months until they got their green card. That was like, I don't think I'll ever do that again.
It's funny, I talked to a guy who, he went like climbing mountains in Russia during the Soviet Union. And it's funny, like the escort, like if it was the KGB, we'd always call them the KGB miner, right? But when it's no, it's just an escort. Like, use nicer words. No, I went to, yeah, so when I went to Johnson Space Center, yeah, there were like 2 of us who were like green card holders. So like we had a van, so we could actually wander around on our own, but it was like, but we had like, you know, it's like a different colored badge.
Right.
And then for to go mission control, then it was like, oh no, we had to do like a whole extra layer of paperwork.
Okay, so thank you everyone for your patience. Much appreciated. While we get airline delays and other fun things sorted out, and we've been scrambling a little bit this morning. I don't know if you can on the back, but I have white in my beard now. That was not there last night when I went to bed. But anyway, so thank you. It's definitely our pleasure to welcome you to our annual luncheon event. And since we are running a little late, I'm obviously not accurate anymore. I'm going to skip through the usual ad stuff really quickly and just say that AIAA is the largest aerospace professional organization, and we do many different things, and come see me afterwards if you want more information. But one of the things that we do is put on events like this at the local level, as well as other things that happen. And again, happy to talk more about that in person later on. Get through all of that, we did the honors and awards. One thing I do want to take a minute is to basically point out that this is not just obviously me doing this alone or anything, but we have a dedicated council that are here. In fact, there are several members here, I believe. So let's see, I see Thomas is over there, and Sarah, and Sina, and Sheen, and Krishna, and where's Nick? There, Nick. Sorry, I missed you the first time I was looking. Nick, and did I miss anyone? Okay, anyway. Yeah, Swati, where? She walked out. Stepped out. Okay, anyway, so Swati, obviously. So, without their help, there's no way that we could do this. And so, let's give them a little round of applause. All right, so we did the awards presentation, so we're going to go for our main presentation here in just a moment. But I'm going to do read it right off the laptop now. So I'm going to introduce our speaker for today. There we go. Dr. Nahum Melamed, did I say that right? Okay. Is a project leader in the Embedded Control Systems Department in the Guidance and Control Subdivision at the Aerospace Corporation. It's a position that he's held since 2003. As a technical lead in launch vehicle software, Dr. Melamed coordinates and guides a team of interdepartmental technical experts and supports validation and mission readiness certification of flight software and mission parameters for NASA's Artemis mission. He serves as the management, program office, customer, and contractor point of contact in the flight software area. In his work, Dr. Melamed monitors flight operations on the day of launch, performs post-flight analysis, and participates in discussions concerning launch performance. And in addition to that, also has a fair bit of interest and background in terms of planetary defense as well, which is what he's now going to talk to you about. So if we please welcome Dr. Melamed.
Okay. Thank you everyone for inviting me to talk here today about scary things like asteroids. And it's so much fun to run into my old colleague Simon from over 20 years ago. Early 2000. Early 2000, right? So that's wonderful. Wonderful to see you, Simon, again. I knew that you moved out here, but I haven't seen you in probably 10 years or something.
More than that.
Wow.
2 decades.
Okay. How am I helped without? Am I okay? Usually
I can hear.
yeah, but in the back.
In the back.
Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'll try to speak up, and if I need a microphone, just okay? Thank you, Eric. And I'd like to encourage, and I met someone who attended one of my virtual talks a couple of years ago. Thank you for reminding me of the conference. Thank you. And usually a Q&A, I'd like to have a Q&A in the middle of my talk. So I won't give elaborate answers, but at least, you know, if the question comes up popping to your mind, instead of waiting an hour to the end, what did I want to ask? Let's do it now, and I try to give a quick answer. So I try not to delay too much on the answers, but brief answers are okay. And just a couple of words about myself. I was born in Jerusalem, Israel, and when I was, how old I was, maybe 11 or something like this, my mom came to me and said, open the radio, somebody's landing on the moon. It's like a rocket that hit my head. Wow! It kind of increased my horizon from the local neighborhood into interplanet space instantly. And that's really what inspired me to want to study about space. And it carried me through my undergrad degrees and graduate degrees and my current work, and it's carried me through my STEM work, which is talks that I give to my kids and to the neighborhood kids and to Los Angeles kids to try to bring interesting topics like this that are inspiring to them and encourage them to pick space for a career. So obviously I have talks that are tuned up for age groups between, I would say, probably 4th and 5th grade and 8 years old, right? Everybody is in town. So with that, I'm going to jump straight into the talk. And what I'm going to do is kind of a mix of a talk. So I'm going to start with a presentation that we prepared about 4 or 5 years ago for NASA, funded by NASA, for a specific scenario, which is clear. Now, one thing that I have to say is that everything that we have, we present to the public, and this is a public event, has to be clear to Aerospace. Aerospace has its security and general counsel and review. This takes months, especially during COVID, it's next to impossible. So what I've done is that I'm taking presentations that we already cleared 4 or 5 years ago, but some of the information inside those presentations is kind of out of date. So I'm going to jump between web pages, which gives fresh information about things, and show a little bit about the studies that we've done. So now let's see, how much time do I have, by the way, for the talk today? Is it the time or?
All day, you have all day.
Okay, so that will leave time for Q&As. I'm sure some of those Q&As are going to pop up into your mind during the talk. Stop me and ask me anything. And if it will take too much time, I'd say let's talk at the end. Okay, so this is the talk that I'm giving you today. Oh, it's not off. Yeah, okay. And so that's the talk that I gave 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago. And the title of the talk was Planetary Defense, Far and Near. We will see what far and near mean in this context. It means both in distance and in time. So let's jump in. I'm going to skip a lot of the stuff here because we really want to jump in. So the general synopsis is this. Asteroids exist in our solar system. They orbit the sun, just like we do, and occasionally they impact with us. If they do, they have been and they have the potential to cause significant damage on the ground. I'm going to show a few examples, historical examples of why is it a concern and why we should do something about it, or at least be aware of that and try to be engaged. If the asteroid, on the course of collision with the Earth, has been discovered decades, we can engage the usual process. We can build those rockets and deflection systems, test them, integrate them, do the usual things that we usually do for space missions. When an asteroid is discovered a few years before impact, we are in a bit of a scramble because we will have to maybe clutch together a system without adequate testing and validation and hope that it works. So we should have a system pre-built on the ground for that. Now, having a pre-built system on the ground is expensive and most likely will never get used because those events are very fine between. So that's one of the dilemmas, right? How much should we put into planetary defense to defend from things that could change the world literally? The subject of this particular study was what happens if objects eluded our discovery and made it into the atmosphere and exploded in the atmosphere. Can we do something about those type of scenarios with literally minutes to impact? That was the topic of this particular study that we done. An example obviously is meteor crater. Anybody has been to meteor crater in Arizona? Right? I encourage you to go visit meteor crater. It's an amazing example of the power of nature. Just a flat desert with a big ball that was created by a small asteroid, really. Something like this happens perhaps once in a few hundred years, 200-300 years, and it can destroy any major city, like Los Angeles, San Francisco, DC. It's a headache for some people, right? We don't want to lose our major cities, right? And installations. Now here, I'm going to jump to the web and just engage with free information, more fresh information that is in this presentation. And then at the end, we'll jump back here and show what we've done with this particular study.
And so the crater now is like 1.2 kilometers, but can you get a sense of like essentially what the blast radius would be in terms of like how far away do you have to be for your house not to get knocked over?
Many kilometers. Right. This size is many kilometers. I would say probably in the range of 50 to 100 kilometers is when you. There's going to be shock waves. There's going to be heat waves. There's going to be things that even if you're 50 kilometers away, you will feel it. Yeah. So probably dozens of kilometers.
Besides, model it the same as a nuclear blast, a ground burst, except for
they actually do, but without the radiation, right? I mean, it's essentially just a release of energy that disrupts the soil. So now let me jump to the web here. Easiest to do. Okay. So this is my page on the Aerospace webpage. They were kind enough to put a page for me here, which describe what I do. And I want to mention one more thing is that actually my day-to-day job is working on Artemis, on the Artemis project. I'm leading the software team for the upper stage, and we are going to launch in a week. Attempt to launch in a week, right? So we have two goals, right? To launch in a week and to be successful, right? Because we do want to be successful in this launch. So that's really my day-to-day job, working on Artemis, exciting things, you know. Shooting rockets to the moon is a nice thing to say, right? Let's see if I can Okay, the best place to go and learn a little bit about planetary defense is to visit that NASA main planetary defense website. You can read what planetary defense is, frequently asked questions, missions that are going, will go, funded, different results, a wonderful resource. I'm not going to delve into it, it's a pointer for you to go and visit this page if you want to learn more about what we do on planetary defense. The other page that I'm encouraging you to do, to visit is, need to see what I'm doing here. Is the JPL website. It's called CNEOS. CNEOS is a cool name because NEO is Near Earth Object. CNEOS is Center for Near Earth Object Studies, but it's also C, those NEOs, right? It's a cool name to So that's what I'm trying to do. It's a wonderful resource for asteroid-specific information. Discovery, tracking, missions, resources, domestic and international. And I'm going to go through some of the collaborations that we are actually, that is ongoing, that is underway with JPL. On that, I have a running project with Paul Chodas. Anybody knows Paul Chodas? From JPL, you know? Yeah, he's the go-to person when an asteroid is discovered. Who should we ask if it's going to impact us? Paul Chodas of JPL is the person in America, in the US. So we have an ongoing project with him, which I'll show near the end of the talk. And again, we are going to visit this website a few times during the talk. This is a wonderful resource about anything asteroids, domestic and international. Aerospace also has a page that we created a couple of years ago. That's the Aerospace page. It reflects some of the activities that we do in planetary defense. So, go visit. Part of it is teaching aids. So, Aerospace hired a professional company to build lesson plans for K-12 students to engage them with science in general and use asteroids as the pretext to study science and engineering. So I give talks to them, I engage with aerospace STEM outreach. If you visit this particular link here, there's lesson learned that are based on the next generation science standards. And turns out, it was kind of a surprise for me, that last year they put planetary defense into the standards as part of studying Newton's law. Right? The collision of a spacecraft with an asteroid, probably inspired by DART, is part of the next generation science standards. That's wonderful. So I'm using this as some of those kind of technical talks for kids. That's what we do. I have different little experiments with knocking balls into other balls and learning about momentum and things like that, which is middle school and high school type of things, and apply them to saving our world. Everybody wants to be a planetary defender, right?
So can I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
So, like you said, that's standard momentum theory. So what did NASA learn from that experiment? Because it's, you know, conservation of momentum. If you hit that asteroid at a certain velocity, then the angle is going to go somewhere else. I mean, was there a surprise? And why did we spend all that money to demonstrate something that's so simple?
Well, there was, because if you remember, the outcome of DART was that they predicted 10 minutes and got 32 minutes. It points to a huge gap in understanding those objects. characterizing those objects. Because suppose it was the other way around, where an object is headed away, we calculate 30 minutes of deflection, and we got 10. Someone was going to open end on the planet, right? Because we moved it from our backyard to his backyard. That's a big gap.
So is there an explanation for why it was different than?
Oh, we don't know anything about those objects. We see a dot of light in the sky. That's an asteroid. What is it made of? How big it is? Is it a rubber pipe? Is it a solid rock? That's the kind of information that is the next big thing, characterization. So right now, most of the resources in planetary defense go into discovery. That's first finding. You cannot do anything about an object that hasn't been found. Once we find them, and I'm sure I'm going to show statistics on what we know today and where we are headed in terms of knowing them, the next big thing would be, how do we characterize those? How do we know how big it is? There's all kind of ideas of shooting CubeSats into them, just taking a picture, loading something into them, see what kind of ejector comes out. That's the next big thing in protecting our planet from this object. In my opinion, that's the biggest outcome of that. It's a huge success, obviously. I saw it live, happening live. Anybody saw it live happening? It was amazing. You know, I wish I thought up the idea in this time. So it's a really cool idea. I'm going to talk about it a little bit, why this particular scenario was selected, because it's measurable, obviously. But it was amazing to watch it happening live in front of my eyes. There was frames up to the very last sliver that was taken. So that's an amazing thing. It demonstrates we can do it, but we have to do it in an effective way, an efficient way. And that demonstrated that we are not there yet. The other thing is that over the years I developed kind of a planetary defense class at Aerospace. You know, just introductory for beginners, kind of talking about the kind of things we do now and about the collaboration with JPL that we do. And one day, a couple of IMAX producers ended in my class. Let's see what you can say. I said, can we include your class in a movie that we are making? Who would say no, right? So I'm in this movie. Let me see if I can play the trailer here. Do we have sound here? I don't know.
No, I don't think we do.
No?
Not from the computer.
Well, I heard we're supposed to, let's try and see what happens.
Okay.
It's muted though.
Yeah, see. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know if it is showing in your area. I don't think I've seen it. Not every IMAX theater shows this. I know there's INC and all of that, but they have a bunch of competitors. The movie was supposed to come out in 2020, and then COVID hit, right? So now there is a whole bunch of IMAX movies that are competing, but if you just Google it, you will find the trailer. And so find them, track them with those antennas, and finally deflect them, which is where I come in, right? I'm the asteroid deflector for aerospace. So here I am in the movie. Go see it if you can, anywhere you can. So that was one of the outcomes of being engaged with this exotic topic, right? Which we can talk to the public, right? Not everything we can say in public, but this is the kind of things that we can go out in public and speak about, which is a cool thing to do. This is a really heavy rocket that they put into the movie. It's a really cool movie to do. It's a documentary style movie. It's nice for the family and kids, and it is high definition, like IMAX 3D. So it's really a good thing. If you have a chance to go see it somewhere, by all means do it. The other thing that we are doing is that neo deflection up. I'm going to talk about it at the end of the talk. So this is the ongoing project with JPL that we have been doing the last, I think, probably 12 years or so. And you know, some of our guys are doing artificial intelligence and things like that. And one of the things that, you know, as you say, inspire the next generation, why don't you start at home? So when my son graduated from high school and was headed to college, he said, I want to study political science. Political science. Now, let's combine political science and planetary defense. You know what? we wrote a paper together where I did the technical and he did the thinking, let's put it this way. Very naively, right? Very naively as a high school graduate, you know, you're naive enough to, okay, let's do that, you know. But we ended up with a paper that was accepted to a conference and presented in Japan, and I took him to Japan and he presented it at the conference. So he continued and produced another paper. He's now a PhD student at Cornell, and he said, I'm writing a new paper now. Success. So I have some success at home. My wife is a biologist, but she has wonderful suggestions and ideas that sometimes inspire me. Yeah, that's a good viewpoint that I wouldn't think as an engineer, right, but as a biologist. So a lot of her ideas are embedded in some of our publications, which is a wonderful thing to do. And hopefully my daughter will get engaged with this as well. Anyway, this is the Aerospace page. Go visit it, and again, it's just a teaser to come and visit those pages. These are all available online. By the way, I can send you, Eric, the list of those web pages by email, so you can distribute it if you want to go visit those pages on your own time. Later on. Okay, let's see where we are here. Okay, let's move on to more serious things. So, here is a picture of the moon of Jupiter, right? And it shows a lot of impact craters. Some of them are quite large. So this is a phenomenon that has been ongoing throughout the solar system over billions of years, right? I'm sure that you took the telescope to the moon and you saw what I'm going to show in a minute here with craters on the moon. So this should be a very familiar scene to everybody who took a telescope out to the moon and you see those craters. Sometimes craters within craters. Obviously, a lot of those happen in the early age of the solar system during the formation, the big bombardment. But a lot of those are happening today, and the moon and us are in the same neighborhood in the solar system. So whatever the moon feels and records, we also suffer. Except we have geological activities on the planet that tend to erase a lot of this evidence, or sometimes it's in the ocean or the desert, things like this, and you hear about the fireball, but that's about it. On the moon, all of this gets recorded. It's like a recording device for those events. So it shows that definitely we are in the type of neighborhood, but let's see what actually does impact with the Earth. So it turns out that over decades, we were able to use sensors, basically satellites, to look at the release of energy in the atmosphere. Some of them are for national security purposes, but they can catch things that are not man-made. And over, I think about 35 years or so, JPL put together this map here, which you can hover over and learn about those different events. You can see that all of these are impactors, small ones, mostly just a release of some amount of energy in the atmosphere. But they show where we are. We live in a shooting gallery, essentially, in space, right? This is the kind of environment around. Space is not empty. It's full of those objects that we collide with. Just one second. And let's just see over, okay, this is dynamic map, obviously. I want to see how many discovered. So 934 entries that were detected since 88. So a good number of them every year. I'm going to talk later about this big one. This is that one here. This is the so-called Chelyabinsk object that exploded in the atmosphere and injured, I think, over 1,000 people in the city of Chelyabinsk over Siberia. And it was the inspiration for me for the study that I'm going to talk at the very end. This was my inspiration.
That was my question, was what is that picture?
Okay.
This one? So.
Yeah. Someone is trying to. Okay, so this shows that those objects tend to exist in our vicinity and collide with our planet. So far, we've been mostly fortunate that they were not large in size. But we'll see what a large object in size could do, and it's not going to be nice.
Alright, I'm curious, so have we seen a uptick as we've gone and had more satellites in service that, like, do we have evidence that we're sensing more of them now than we were at 88 because we have more sensors, right? And so have we plateaued or?
So wait for the next slide.
Out of all these fireballs, how many of those fireballs produce real impact craters that we can still visit, like meteor crater?
No, they all release their energy in the atmosphere. These are not impact on the ground. These are objects that simply small enough to burn out in the atmosphere, release an amount of energy. Sometimes there are fragments that make it down to the ground. Like the Chelyabinsk object left, I think, and I saw from the pictures, a meteorite about that size that landed in the frozen lake and dug out and put in a museum in the area in Russia. But that's about it. Most of those just release their energy in the atmosphere and release some sort of a shock wave. There was another question? Yeah.
Yeah, then I was asking like what that is, like Earth observation satellites or ground.
Oh,
sensors.
okay. So the next slide. Let's move to the next slide here. So we touch this question here. So these government sensors are quite accidental, but what was done here is quite interesting. One of the guys that was associated with this program actually worked with us at Aerospace now. And these are geosynchronous satellites that are intended to detect lightning activities, and they are much more sensitive. This is the activity that is happening just over the continental US, the North America area, maybe South America, North and South America. In about 4 years or so, they already detected 4,000 of these. So it's like an order of magnitude larger than what we've seen with just like the primitive sensors that are designed to detect launches from our adversaries. These are much more sensitive, and so you see how dense it is, right? I mean, all of these are small objects, obviously, but some of these objects that are orbiting the sun are quite large in size, and among the community of planetary defenders is a question of when and not if one of these big ones will find us. Just a question of if, just by statistics, by looking at it. Some of these are large, and they will find us one day.
How do you distinguish it from the lightning? Is it just like the spectrum or the intensity or?
I don't know. It's something that is technical. I can ask the person who works with my associate and ask him how do they distinguish. I guess it's the frequency kind of thing. Question? No. Okay. Question here. Oh, yeah.
So is the density of all of the events the same everywhere around the Earth? Is it just like because of the Mercator projection of the map here that stretches it out closer to the pole?
Yeah, those satellites are intentionally put above North America to tell us about activities here. These are American satellites. So they're geosynchronous, they sit above a certain area and cover a specific area on the ground. So they don't move the around. But the assumption is that they are uniform all around, right? There's no reason why they would behave differently in China, right? There's no indication that that's the case. Just uniform, very uniform distribution of this impact. Okay, so this answer the question?
Yeah.
Currently, we are aware of about a couple of hundred impact cases on the Earth. Obviously, this is a small number relative to what we have happened in the past because of the geological processes that are occurring on our planet over millennia and millions of years. They tend to just erase a lot of this evidence. But there are good evidence. One of them is video dated, but there are a couple of hundred of them around the Earth that did survive. All right. Chicxulub data, right? This is the dinosaur extinction event. 66 million years ago, 10-kilometer object hit in the Yucatan Peninsula, created a 180-kilometer diameter crater or gravitational anomaly in the ground, and is accepted to be the reason why, or one of the main triggers why the dinosaurs got extinct. Some people say that there are other processes that were ongoing, but the fact is that a Berkeley geologist by the name of Alvarez traveled to Italy to study the magnetic field of the Earth in some limestone area in Italy, and he came across an area in the limestone that was separated by a thin layer of ash. Below that layer of ash there was abundance of dinosaur fossils, and above it there was zero. So obviously this was an extinction event. This took it to Berkeley 66 million years ago. There was some event. That sliver of ash contained 600 times more iridium than is found typically on the Earth. And we know that iridium is a material that is found in meteorites coming from space. So hey, connect the dots, and it was rock space. Okay. Well, so they you know that in the Gulf of Mexico they are digging for oil. The oil companies are using sensors to try to find the best place to dig for oil in the ground. And they find those circular shapes in the bottom of the ocean to the tune of 180 kilometers in diameter that cannot be explained by any geological activity. There's nothing that can explain 120 kilometer circle in the ground. And so they calculated energy. This was a 10 kilometer object, and you know, obviously it shot a humongous amount of soil out to the space, and created probably global firestorms and all that. Most of the dinosaurs just died of starvation and cold weather. That's it. Right? Locally, obviously, they were extinct, but it changed completely the climate around the Earth for enough period of duration that allowed the small mammals to evolve into us. Meteor craters, we talked about it. So some of you have been there. I really encourage you when you go down to Arizona. I think it's not terribly far from here. You know, it's probably a few hours drive, and you can travel there. It's a beautiful area, and it's just amazing. We were sitting out. I took my family to the crater here, and you can visit this page. You can touch really large meteorites and space rocks, and you get to travel around the edge of the crater. It's just an amazing experience to go at the edge of the crater. Let's see how it looks here, like that. It's just an amazing thing to go out from the visitor center and walk around the edge and look at the power of nature. So I took my family there, and we went on this balcony, and it was wonderful. And this was like in the early, not 2000, but early, around maybe 2010-ish kind of thing. I encourage everybody to go visit. They have a wonderful visitor center. You can spend hours reading about where those objects came from, what they are made out of, and that's years ago. I'm sure that it's very, very interesting.
Do we know when this crater was formed?
50,000 years ago. The crater was formed 50,000 years ago. And the interesting story about it is that it was understood to be made by an asteroid made out of iron. So it was like an iron core that hit it, and the guy who bought the land, his name was Barringer, actually got Congress to assign that land to him because he was an entrepreneur. He said, oh, a good chunk of iron must be hiding below the surface there. And he dug and dug and dug and found nothing. He just didn't understand the physics, because iron is embedded into the rocks that are around the asteroid, right? Around the crater, right? So all of this iron is now embedded into the rocks. If you pick a piece of a rock from the edge of the asteroid and put it to a magnet, it's going to be attracted to the magnet. It's going to be magnetic, right? If you take a piece of rock from several miles out, it's going to be just a regular piece of rock. It won't be attracted to the magnet. So when we visited there, I got a piece of rock from the edge of the crater, and if you take one of these round magnets to it, it pops up.
So, for the Yucatan impact, I just wondered, like, has anyone modeled whether, in theory, you might have an ejector from Earth on the moon? Like, is there enough energy that it kind of
maybe fragments, but I haven't heard of anything material. Yeah. But the collision, the impact was powerful enough to apparently send shockwaves throughout the Earth. And so in the exact opposite location in India, there is the Deccan volcanic something, exactly opposite from the figure. And these are areas of volcanic ash that accumulated over thousands of volcanic eruptions, right? So now those areas are being eroded just by nature, right, by climate. They can count those layers, and they found that around the time the collision occurred, the rate of eruptions doubled. So there's different pieces of the puzzle that are being collected still, but everything points to a mega event that occurred 66 million years ago. Now, how frequent those events are, the estimate may be 100 million years. So we have another 30 million years to worry about it, so we are okay. So we have other things to worry about, I'm sure, in the more immediate future in our lifetime. Let's go to the next one. Okay. Oh, that's an interesting one. About a year ago, a visitor came to visit our neighbor. And we just happened to talk a little bit. She was from Estonia. We talked about what I do and asteroids and something. Did you know that in Estonia there is an island with impact craters, small ones? I never learned about it, but I said, wow, let's take a look. I Googled it, and sure enough, there is some small impact craters in an island that belongs to Estonia. And now we want to go visit them. I want to go and actually visit this area. So one day, I think the area is not very safe now. Okay, Tunguska. Anybody heard about the Tunguska event? Oh, a few of them heard about Tunguska, yeah. So that was another big fireball, about the same size as the object that hit meteor crater, maybe 50 meters, 50 meters in size, exploded in the atmosphere. There is no crater in this area, but it flattened about 2,000 square kilometers of Siberian desert. This is bigger than most large cities around the globe. If that event would occur just 3 hours later, because of the same latitude and the rotation of the Earth, Moscow would have been gone, and Belgium, and some other cities on the same latitude. Just a few hours later, that event would have caused the destruction of major cities all over Asia. This is part of the concern that we are having, is that objects like this, which are almost in a lifetime, can affect us, affect civilization in fact, right? So this is an example of that. We'll see a little movie about this as the next event in just a moment. Actually, we'll see it in as part of the presentation. Okay, Chelyabinsk. You remember the event that occurred almost 10 years ago over Russia? It was all over the news. A lot of dash cams took nice videos that showed every angle and all of that. And they were able to calculate energy and trajectory and where it came from and why we didn't discover it. And obviously, it showed up with zero warning. It just came and exploded without warning. I'm going to show a small video in a moment about it, and it's really telling. You have a question?
I had a question about why some objects airburst and why some objects create craters. Because you said the Chelyabinsk airbursted, the Tunguska one airbursted, but it's the same size as the one that created meteor crater.
Right, luckily it was made of rubber pile. And rubber pile has a much larger surface area with them, right? They hit the atmosphere, they just break out and release the energy at a higher altitude before they have a chance to make it down to the ground. And the meteor crater object was probably just an iron core, not a bullet. Some of it must have melted on entry, but most of it made it down to the ground, or some of it made it down to the ground. We never know how much, but it was just like an iron core, like an iron bullet that hit the ground. So And also it depends on the size. It is understood that objects that are, let's say, 15 meters and less, most likely we just get burned out or diminish in size to the level that they are not going to be really threatening unless they fall on the house, right? But above 50 meters, the Cheryl's object told us, it was about 80 meters, so even small object can cause a lot of damage and casualties. The city, the residents of the city of Chelyabinsk were very, very fortunate on that day because the object came shallow and released its energy at about 30 kilometers of altitude. The more typical situation is that those objects hit straight down at, let's say, 45 degrees, release the energy at a low altitude, and simulations show that it was knocked down thousands of buildings and probably a lot of casualties. So even small objects need to be taken into account today. This is in a lifetime type of event. That's where the majority of the risk, the perceived risk, is today. Let's find as many as we can, including the big ones and the medium-sized ones, but try to learn to deal with the small ones, those that can hit us, or immediate descendants, right, in the future. That's not the concern. Yeah.
Is there much variation in the velocity?
Yeah. Much variation. Yeah, it depends on the orbit. It depends on the orbit and the point of intersection between those orbits. And I'm going to show you in tables coming up soon. And you'll see the variation of the velocity, relative velocities. Okay. Let's see here. So I think this one here is, so this is the presentation that I showed earlier, the PowerPoint. Let me move forward just a little bit more before we jump to the presentation to see if there is anything else interesting to talk about. Okay, yeah, let's take a look at this thing. Let's look at this. Let me refresh the page here. Okay. This is loaded? Yeah, okay. Let's look at these here. This is a reality check of what's going on around the planet right now as we speak. It's from JPL website here. Today is November 5th. So we have those 4 objects that are zipping by our planet right now as we speak. Let me do one more thing here. Is take a look at, instead of astronomical units, let's go to lunar distances. Okay? So we have an object of 30 to 70 meters at about 7 times the distance to the moon, zipping by our planet right now, this minute. And here is an object of maybe 50 to 120 meters at 11 times the distance to the moon. Today, coming up soon, we have an object of 700 meters, zipping at 18 times the distance to the moon. These are really, really close distances to us. This is why those objects are being called near-Earth objects, because even though they didn't collide with us, they have the potential to collide with us in the future, and they just indicate that there is a whole bunch of them out there that could collide with us of significant magnitude. This is about the size of the object that collided over Tunguska. So an object like this could impact us and destroy a major city at just about any time with no warning. An object of that magnitude, which was discovered this year, right, in 2022. So we have no system in place to deal with this. If somebody had come and told you, bless you, to be prepared for an impact for an object of a couple of 100 meters later this year in some location in the Earth, there is nothing we can do about it, except either run into it or away from it. So it's a concern. These are all real objects that exist around our planet today. And what if, right? This is a big question. It could change humanity as we know it, potentially in those type of objects. How many? So let's go to the discovery statistics. As of just a few days ago, 30,000 have been discovered. and look at the rate of discovery accelerating, which means that the more telescopes we put out, the more we find, which tells us that currently we still live in the dark ages of knowing what about those objects. The good thing about it is that look at the red one. The red one are the really big one, global, objects that are larger than a kilometer. These are really global. An object like this will destroy a continent instantly. It's flat now. We are not finding anymore, which can tell us that we found probably the majority of those really big ones, and none of them are threatening in the next century. This is about how far we can make predictions. Right? There's still uncertainty in those orbits, like they're being affected by the other planets and moons and asteroids, so we cannot make predictions beyond maybe a few dozen years, maybe a century. None of the big ones are a threat to us in the near future, in the next century. So we leave those to the next generations to deal with. The middle-sized ones, we are maybe at around 30% of discovery. Not good enough, obviously. And the small ones, we are at an accelerated rate of discovery. Probably it will take 20 or 30 years before we start to flat out, likely at a few hundred thousands, potentially millions of this object. So that's the majority of the investment in planetary defense today is to find them. Right? So to find them is number one now. You cannot do anything about those that we don't know about. And after that, we'll deal with what to do with potential impactors, unless one of them sneaks in.
Do we have a sense of like all the things that we're detecting, how many are in stable orbits? And all about all relatively stable orbits? What I mean is, how many are, essentially, how many, the things that are going close to us now, obviously, if they're in an orbit and it intersects Earth's orbit, then, sometime in the future, maybe a long time, clearly the two orbits intersect, versus, if some asteroid hits something in the belt, and then it's kind of very random, there's sort of a new set of objects that we actually have to track. Do we think the problem is that there's mostly a whole bunch of things in orbits that we could predict really well if we could just see them all? Or do we think the problem is there's actually new things, comets, other things, on sort of very big orbits that kind of disrupt things when they go through the asteroid belt, and that creates problems?
Yeah.
Do we have a sense of like the relative magnitude of those two things?
Maybe we do, but I'm not knowledgeable enough to know those details. It's a good question about comets. Comets have a unique feature to them, is that they come from the outer regions of the solar system. So they typically are discovered late in the game. They are typically larger than asteroids. And they come much, much faster. Right? They come from higher altitude. So when they come into the inner region of the solar system, they come at speeds much, much faster than asteroids. So if a comet would have been discovered on the collision course with the Earth, it's a much bigger problem than a typical asteroid. So I'm going to show a little study that we've done on the comet scenario. Did you have a comment? Yeah.
I could add a little something.
Oh, sure, go on.
One problem with long-term prediction is the non-gravitational effects, things, Yarkovsky effect and other things, it's brighter on one side, darker on another, so it makes them inherently not as predictable in the long run.
And also I think comets, because they come from regions of the solar system which are frozen, they contain all kind of features that cause them to kind of outgas, and that changes their trajectory over time, so they're kind of meandering around, difficult to intercept them, versus a very well-defined object. So maybe that's what you meant.
So we can predict for a century or so, but beyond that is kind of crap.
Beyond the century we are not even attempting, but plus, it's good. We have to leave something for kids and grandkids, right? But that's the reality in which we live, right? We live in a reality of shooting downward, right? And we believe it's a question of when. That's why I'm coming to give these talks, is to kind of drive more people to be aware of it and send the young ones to learn about it, study, and maybe even be engaged with it. That's the purpose of my visit really, is to get people inspired to do something about it. Like I was inspired from Apollo, and I saw that maybe around 15 years ago. I said, somebody has to do something about it. So I tried to do something about it.
For funding as well, right?
funding is the problem. So funding, there is probably decent amount of funding for discovery, and anything that you would build on the ground likely will not get. And so there are so many other hot potatoes that we, the international community, have to engage. And we have to survive to meet up with an asteroid. You know, who knows what kind of political things are happening around the world right now that could be even scarier than an asteroid, right? So right now, most of the attention is given to discovering objects. In case an object is discovered on a collision course, then in conferences that we hold, there is a good corner there for disaster management, right? So, okay, an object is being discovered. We don't have a system. It's going to hit us in 6 months. What do we do? So let's prepare for evacuation and relocation and things like that, and assessing the affected size of the area, things like that. That's the best we could do today. If anything is discovered in less than a few years out. It's just an everything visually, right?
What would you say is the quality of like the current like systems we have in place for dealing with the potential impact right now, or
Zero.
Zero. So there's just
Nothing. We have nothing on the, nothing in preparedness is just non-existent. It's a gap in my opinion, and in the opinion of my colleagues in the planetary defense community. But again, funding is the big issue here. It's not cheap to build those systems. Those space missions are not cheap. And the money is just not out there. There is some budget at NASA for the Planetary Defense Corporation office, but it's being, distributed gingerly and mostly for discovery today.
Are there even any like disaster management protocols or anything?
Yeah. So some of them are being developed between NASA and FEMA. Every few years they hold a tabletop exercise that I attended some of them. And they do exercise of what information should be conveyed from the experts at NASA to the disaster management at FEMA. They have no clue what kind of disaster it is. They can talk hurricanes, earthquakes, things like that. They cannot talk asteroids. They know nothing about asteroids. Like, for example, one of the interesting things about an asteroid is typically the impact corridor is like a long corridor that stretches across the Earth. So you don't want to escape along that corridor because you just escape into another region that might be affected. You want to escape perpendicular to the corridor. These are the kind of things that people at FEMA are not aware of, and so there is a communication protocols that are being built to even give them the necessary information for them to understand the level of the threat, the nature of the threat. There was another question?
Yeah. I was just wondering, when you say, what exactly do you mean? The definition in terms of time, distance, what exactly is the
Object. Okay, there is a distinct definition that is created by NASA, JPL, that objects with orbits that potentially can put them at a certain distance from the Earth are considered near-Earth objects. So those orbits typically do not intersect with the orbit of the Earth, but they come close enough to be a concern. There are other class of objects that are called potentially hazardous objects, where the orbits do intersect, which means that there could be a situation in the future where the two objects could be in the same place at the same time, which we call collision. So those distances are just arbitrary. They say, okay, they are attached to some level of risk of how much those orbits can change over time or being perturbed over time by the gravity of other major bodies in the solar system or non-gravitational effects like this, I guess, mentioned. And DSI, like this is deep space.
Deep space industries.
Wow. So this is really, it's just an arbitrary definition that is related to, what risk those objects bring to our well-being. And it's defined. I can go to the JPL webpage where they have the definition. It's on one of the pages in this area.
Is it?
Like I think if you go to the about that, they'll tell you those numbers.
So is the definition intentionally arbitrary, or is just a difficult
I think-
definition to quantify? For example?
Well, it is difficult to quantify, but I think it's attached to some level of risk, right? So, what real risk those objects pose to our welfare? If they are too far away from us, like they are in the asteroid area, they will never pose any risk to us, at least not in the foreseeable future, in centuries or thousands. But if objects are on orbits that are near our Earth orbit, there is a potential in the future, so we want to keep an eye on it in case something changes. That's
Yeah, I'm curious, when it comes to planetary defense, it sounds like you said nothing really exists right now, but I was wondering, like, conceptually, is there a distinction between like Earth-based defense systems and then maybe like space-based defense systems? And are there pros and cons?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. It's generally yes. Because we don't have any of these systems today, and studies that are done are sporadic. My personal opinion, I tell you my personal opinion here is that if you have a space-based system, then you already have a system, right? If you have a system on the Earth, you have to build it, right, and maintain it. But if it's sitting out in space, it has better responsiveness, right, because it's designed to respond to situations. However, those asteroids come from random direction, right? Those space-based object systems have to orbit something, right? The Earth, the Sun, the Moon, something. But the asteroid comes from just any arbitrary direction. You cannot aim it at this unknown, right? So it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge how to design those systems. I think my opinion is that it's going to be a combination of those systems. I think that one thing that can be done, I think at a relatively modest level of funding and quickly, is characterization effort. Right? If you can put a few CubeSats out in space ready to be launched with zero delay, right? We discovered an object. We think it's headed our way. What can we do to understand it better? What you want to get in the fastest is information about it, right? To nail down its orbit. Is it really coming our way or not? How big it is? And you can do it with the CubeSat. That's some of the things that we've been proposing.
How far out do you think like how far out would the CubeSats need to go?
I think the ambitions with CubeSats will go to Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah. And DART, right? And the Italian CubeSat. CubeSats are now interplanetary. It's definitely global.
With the impact distribution you showed in the earlier map, the colorful slide, you had two of them with the impact distribution. How plausible is it to have an outer space defense system without it being destroyed by incoming things, if it's just going to sit out there for a long period of time and not being used?
Oh, I mean like a satellite?
Yes, a satellite
system.
Satellite system just sits there and waits.
Space vehicle. And
Yeah.
I think the likelihood is very small.
Okay.
I think that space is large, and those spacecraft are small. The likelihood that an asteroid will impact with one of those objects is
Not an asteroid, just one of those things that you just showed on the map. Remember you showed all these things.
These are all explosions in the atmosphere, right?
Yeah, so those things will hit the satellite before they get to the atmosphere. They're out.
And they do. In fact, they do. Micrometeorites collisions with space systems are the common thing.
Okay. So when they destroy this defense system, will they keep taking incoming?
It could. They could. I think when some of those re-entry objects that are coming here, that are falling back to the Earth, show little impact craters on them from micrometeorites. We have some of those samples at Aerospace. If you ever come to visit Aerospace, we have a tank of what was it, Delta 2 or something, with about 15 little impact craters made out of micrometeorites. Some of them knocked holes through the iron, or the metal, through the titanium.
How long was that on the orbit? Like what time period is that?
I think it was about a year.
Okay.
Yeah, over about a year. Yeah, micrometeorites are abundant. Yeah. They're all going to disappear in the atmosphere. They're going to all burn out. But in space, you head on, and at a speed of 5 or 10 kilometers per second, it's faster than a bullet of a rifle, right? It's going to drive it off through this area easy. That's a concern for colonizing the moon, by the way, right? The moon does not have an atmosphere. Even the small ones are concerned for those that are going to live on the moon. So that's why they are thinking of creating those lava tubes to live like underground and things like that. But it's a challenge. We don't have really good materials to protect from several kilometers per second, even small objects. So let's move on. Okay, just one more item is that like those objects, any object that is being discovered is put into what is called the Minor Planet Center with the ephemeris of those objects. Anybody can pull this information out and do statistical analysis and study, and all of this is available worldwide, right? Planetary-wide. NASA is putting together a mission. It's called the NEO Survey. I think it's called now NEO-SM. And the idea here is to have a tool in space to find those objects that uses infrared and sits in the Lagrange point number 1 between us and the sun. Because that object can look at the illuminated side of these objects. Not like we are looking at, we are blinded by looking into the sun, and we cannot see this object approaching us from the direction of the sun at a very wide sector. So the idea is to put a sensor that will tell us, okay, you have a week to prepare, evacuate, right? And you don't get this kind of no warning show like Chelyabinsk. The other thing is that those objects only the sun probably millions of times before they decide to find us. So if the orbits can be detected and determined and calculated early enough, maybe an orbit or two before they collide with the planet Earth, maybe there is time to do something about it, right? If somebody will tell you in 5 or 10 years that object is going to collide with us, you'll see some action around to attempt to do something, right? And that's the purpose of this mission, is to get this information early. Dark. So everybody followed dark. Not going to talk too much about it, but the good thing about it was that it was selected because the collision here basically knocked about, turned out to be 32 minutes out of the orbital period. And the idea, I know the guy who from Johns Hopkins, from AIAA, gave me the report once and all of this stuff, and he said, how can we test it? Well, if we change the orbit of secondary, we can measure it from the Earth by simply looking at the change in the light intensity coming from the main object. So simple, right? And it became a mission. So amazing. So I'm not going to say anything more about it, but it's just an exciting milestone in building some capability for planetary defense. You can deflect those objects by a measurable amount, and that's fantastic.
How big was
160 meters. It's a big object. Yeah. And we used a half-ton satellite, half-ton space vehicle.
Yeah.
That's promising, right? That's promising. But the characterization gap is still open. It shows us that we cannot do a proper mission design without getting information about how big it is, what it is made of, and so on. Yeah. The other problem also is that if you hit the object, if the object is smaller than you thought when you hit it, with too big of a pair of like a mass, like a collision mass, it could actually break it and it can come back and come as a ricochet, kind of shotgun type of effect, rather than completely deflecting it. So instead of deflection, you will get a whole bunch of them hitting the planet, and it's not desirable as well.
So I'm just trying to understand the annual concepts. I think I'm kind of confusing between the NEOs and because when you're reading an asteroid, you're basically on a trajectory, hyperbolic orbit. Or is it going to be like a heliocentric object that's basically coming and passing by?
Yeah. So relative to the Earth, it's hyperbolic. But relative to the Sun, it's a closed orbit. It all depends what object you measure the trajectory relative to, right?
So the NEOs could be heliocentric or...
They're all heliocentric. They're all heliocentric.
Okay.
Right? They're all heliocentric, but from the point of view of the Earth, if they come and go, they are hyperbolic.
Right.
Except for those, interstellar, right, or more, which are, hyperbolic even to the solar system, right, because they supposedly came from the galaxy and exit into the galaxy, so they are hyperbolic to the solar system.
Right.
But all of the asteroids and comets that are known to us, they are closed orbits relative to the Sun, but open orbits relative to the Earth.
And the distance, I think, is anywhere between 0.3 to 1.3 astronomical unit area, which is like 450 million kilometers.
Yeah, one astronomical unit is
That's
about...
the definition, but
Yeah,
distance-wise.
one astronomical unit is 150 million kilometers, so it's about that much. It's considered near Earth object.
If I may add, the near-Earth objects are thought to have been perturbed from the main belt, which is between Mars and Jupiter, by resonance with Jupiter. I think is the main mechanism.
Asteroid belt, right?
Yeah, main asteroid belt is between Mars and Jupiter, 3.5 or so AU, but the near-Earth asteroids and objects are much closer and probably populated by perturbation from the main belt, and then they're depleted by impacts or near impacts with Earth, Moon, Mars, Venus.
Yeah, that's the reason why we cannot predict beyond a few decades, and we don't attempt, and we don't need to really. I mean, we have the capability to build those launch systems in the range of 10 years. We can do a good job building some detectors and launching detectors in maybe 10 years, 15 years. We have the technology, we are doing it every day, just down to tuning those systems to do what DART has done, basically. So a few decades is acceptable for, not knowing exactly where those objects are going to be on. We hold biannual land defense conferences. The next one is going to be in Vienna at the UN headquarters. We are hoping to bring some world delegates to come and practice decision making. It's not too late to write an abstract for the conference. Anybody wants to write? Still, we have until December 15 to write. Some of the topics that are going to be covered, I'd like to spend one hour here. We want to look at policy, we want to look at discovery, characterization, modeling, campaign, consequences, disaster management, public education and communication, which is what I'm doing here. And what is the process that we will engage if an object is discovered any other way? What's the trigger to do something? Is it 1%, 5%, 10% of impact in 10 years? When do we need to kick ourselves into action? This is a big question. And illegal, right? There is an international law that says we cannot put weapons in outer space, even not for peaceful use. Is this useful in a case where an asteroid might kill millions? So the law is being now evaluated in the purpose of adapting it to reality. So we cover all of that now. Everything is being recorded, and the previous conference, there's supposed to be somewhere, there's supposed to be a link somewhere here that will, there should be a link somewhere to the previous conference. All of the talks have been recorded, and all of the presentations are accessible on the web page. So if anybody is interested in a more technical type of presentation, go visit the previous conference. This is also going to be recorded in the next April. And you can read about things that are of interest to specific fields. Some people like to know about characterization, telescopes, or like to design missions. All of that is described in the conference. Yeah, so this is the page for the previous conference, and here you can see these are the recordings of the entire 5 days of the conference, and down here are the individual sessions with all of the presentations and slides, all recorded here, so you can go and visit this page and access what was presented. You can almost attend the conference virtually, right, anytime in the future for educational purposes and awareness. Part of the things that we are doing at the conferences, we are doing exercises, right? JPL and a few other, and some from, from AIMS, right? Some from AIMS. Who is this from AIMS? I know you are from AIMS, right? Anybody else is from AIMS? No? Okay, so some of the AIMS people here are engaged with people from Goddard and from JPL to design exercises that span a few days into the conference. They take a scenario of several months to several years, compact it into 5 days of the conference, and practice the decisions and the processes that we will have to engage in order to understand all of the aspects of addressing realistic scenarios. So these are all exercises, hypothetical, but very, very realistic. I'm not going to go of any of them, but the only one that I'm going to talk a little bit about is the Comet scenario. So this is a Comet scenario that was presented in 2019 with the idea is that nothing can be done about it because that comet came from above the ecliptic plane, right? The ecliptic plane is the plane of the Earth around the Sun. And when we launch a rocket, the rocket basically follows around the ecliptic plane. We don't have rockets that do a 90 degrees very easily, right? It's not over a short period of time. So that comet was discovered less than 2 years before impact with the Earth. What can you do? We tried with rockets, and let's see if I have it here. Not this one. Yeah, okay, so we did a little study. So we say, okay, what can we do? Let's try to find a solution. So we used the app that we developed with JPL, and we found that because of the inability of the rocket to do 90 degrees, you can intercept the comet 2 to 3 weeks before impact with the Earth. That's not good enough. Right? If you want to use some sort of a nuke to destroy it, it's not a good idea to do it 2 weeks before impact, right? Who knows what kind of fall down you'll get out of that. So, we looked at how many SLS rockets, right? These are the new Artemis boosters. We require to move that comet, and we found that if we use 30 SLS rockets, how realistic it is, right? We can move it from here to here. We can move it half Earth radii with 30 SLS rockets. This doable? Anything that could ever come into reality? No. So what can we do? That was the idea of one of our collaborators. How about solar cells? All we need to do is to use the radiation of the sun to orient the spacecraft to intercept with the incoming asteroid much sooner than 2 or 3 weeks. That's the whole purpose. And it turns out that if you have a large enough area to mass ratio on the satellite, and you can put a nuclear device on it, you can do that. So we showed by simulation that we can actually do that. And this is the proposed steerable solar cell mechanism that the company is proposing. It can be folded and put into a rocket, deployed in space, sent into the closest distance to the sun, use the intense solar radiation, solar pressure,
radiation pressure to steer the spacecraft into an intercept trajectory with the incoming comet.
So you launch chemically kind of upwind towards the sun, and then you deploy this over sails.
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out what.
You have to launch it chemically towards the sun.
Yeah.
But from then on, you let
and
the
then it's kind
radiation
of
sun.
upwind. So that,
Yes, yes. So here's what we have here. I think I have the simulation somewhere. I think that's the simulation. Yeah, okay, let's play it. So this is all simulated orbital mechanics with the power or the force of the solar radiation embedded into the spacecraft, and those solar cells that are steerable are steered in such a way to do essentially orbital plane change, which is very difficult to do with normal orbits, very expensive to do. But here we see that we do one after another over a very short period of time, and we are able to do planar change and then put it on an exit trajectory that will intercept with the incoming comet at about 3 to 4 months before impact, at about 3 astronomical units from the Earth. That's where we can explode a nuclear device and try to destroy the incoming comet. So we have a conceptual solution, right? There's a lot of difficulties there. There's outgassing and how to intercept, an object like this. I mean, no doubt that when you dig into the engineering part, but from purely orbital mechanics and basic physics, we can do it.
What's
And
the rules time?
about 3.5 months. The flight itself is also just a few months. But we intercepted it at about 3.5 or 4 months prior to the astronomical units from the impact location.
so in the scenario, the launch time was like what, 7 months before the impact?
Launch time?
It was about 7 months before the impact. So 3.5 months flight time.
So the scenario was that the comet was discovered about less shy of 2 years before impact. So we had enough time to set it up. Now all of this assumes that you have the system in place, right? You cannot build a system like this out of scratch, right? So let's say we have a system sitting in let's say a heliocentric orbit, not Earth orbit, but heliocentric orbit, sitting there, basic system ready to be called to action. And you call it into action, you send it towards the sun, it does this plane change, which you can do very quickly, even faster than those few months, and just hit the comet. So we showed that basic physics showed that it's feasible.
With this scenario, would you be actually trying to break apart the comet or just nudge it enough that it doesn't
You
hit
cannot
the Earth?
nudge it. It's a comet that moves at like 50 kilometers per second, and it's a big one. So nudging it is probably not. It's going to be trying to.
Nudging it works if you have decades at a time.
Decades, yes. But if you have decades, you can probably use chemical rockets, right? You don't need to go into exotic things like this. But with comets, you usually don't have decades.
Right.
They just come at a short notice, and so that was the challenge. So we are proud that we found the solution. It seems not to have a solution.
From the planetary defense standpoint, you guys are usually a backup plan, in case the intercept doesn't happen.
I'm sure that
Because it's serious.
Yeah.
It depends on the probability of it happening, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
like
Well, yeah.
99.5%.
You're talking about backup plans. We don't have you in the basement. So I would assume that when you build a system like this, you would probably want to have some more than one shot. And I'll show you something that we've done in a moment that has 2 shots at attempting to do something. So
There was a recent Hollywood movie, Look Up or Looking In.
Look Up, yeah.
Look Up, yeah.
But that was more political satire than Okay, let's just move on with a little bit of time here. So where am I here? Okay, so I'm here. I'll talk just a couple of minutes about the new deflection arc. It's a collaborative project between Aerospace and JPL, and this is an arc that has orbital mechanics embedded into the engine and launch vehicle performance, and the way we do it is that we use the arc to simulate missions in the ballpark sense, right? So that's the version of the arc that's sitting on the JPL side. We have a version of the arc that's sitting on the aerospace side. And the reason why I want to point this one here is because we added one more feature, which is a team mode. So that team mode enables to do asteroid deflection contests, where we team up a group of people, could be high school students, they are quite good at that, or some of my SMEs, my associates, and giving them increasingly challenging scenarios, and they use this arc to try to deflect the object. That's the reason why we have the team mode in here. Then you can pick, but basically what we're trying to do, the way we want to do it here is that we have a simulated asteroid that impacts the Earth right in the middle there, and we want to move it outside of this red circle. The red circle represents the capture zone of the asteroid. It's a little bit bigger than the size of the Earth because in the last minute, those objects tend to be pulled in by gravitational focusing of the Earth. So we need to make sure we deflect a little bit outside to make up for this effect. So outside of the red circle, and typically we just apply, I'm not sure if it's functioning here. It doesn't seem to be functioning here. Yeah, actually it does function for me. So I'm trying to find solutions that will create a geometry to be able to send a spacecraft to collide with the asteroid. And okay, so I was able to find a solution. Now I have a transfer trajectory that is calculated by a number solver. And so this tells me that if I launch at a particular day and collide with the asteroid at another particular day, I was able to move it from the center down to the green dot. It's not good enough, obviously. Someone is going to complain. So I have to change a little bit more. So I changed it a little bit more, and I can probably try to change the time of launch from the air. Or I can shoot two of these rockets, right? If I shoot two of the rockets, I pick, instead of just one, I can pick two out of 5. So now I was able to move it out. So this tells me the size of the deflection campaign. How many rockets do I need to shoot at this object of a particular size to move it out of collision with the Earth, to move it off the Earth? So that's the nature of this kind of contest. And we've done a few of these. It's great fun, you know, it's dynamic in the room. Everybody wants to get a better performance on deflection. It's just an exciting thing to do. I give talks at local schools. Here's a talk that I gave at a local, girls' schools here. And some of them came to me after the talk and said, I'm going to be an aerospace engineer. So and we are hiring. If there are any students or students that want to work in those kind of areas, feel free to approach me. I'm accessible. And now the last thing I want to do is to just jump to back to the presentation and quickly just go through the specific study that we've done and show why we have done this. So I'm going to jump for a lot of that here. I think this is a good movie to present. Oh, there's no sound, huh? There's no sound. Okay. So I'm going to skip that because the majority of the industry is really the sound behind this clip. But it shows some of those dashcam, video clips that were taken and talk about those things. But you already got the big picture of this one. Let us skip it. When you have to look at it, and I gave a talk back in 2018, we had 18,000 objects on this floor. Today, 30,000. So almost double in 4 years. And we are on the way to discovering more. This is just another reality check of what we can get the top back then. So what we've done here is that we took those fireballs and also the close approaches, and we put them on this bullseye. It's very telling, in my opinion. Here is day 0. A lot of the objects to the left, all of the objects to the left were discovered after the fact. They already zipped by our planet. Fortunately, they did not impact with us, and they were discovered when we looked at their illuminated side. All of those to the right had a few days or a few weeks to close approach. If any of these had been an impactor, we probably wouldn't have been seen, or we would not have been ready for the object. So we have no plan, no response plan to do against any of these shortfalls. We just don't have it here. The best we potentially could do is evacuation and disaster management. This is just the best we could potentially do. So here's the Chelyabinsk, famous conclave. I was sitting at the conference, and interestingly enough, that conference was held in Flagstaff, Arizona, not far from Meteorplate. Why? Because I took my family to visit the Meteorplate a couple of years before, and we were sitting in Romania in 2011 thinking, where should we hold the next conference? I said, why not there? And it was held there. Obviously, it was focused on Chelyabinsk. And a guy from, I think, is it Alamos, I forget now which center, did those simulations from Sandia. I got it from Sandia. He wanted, here's those hydrocodes simulations that can do elaborate analysis of those kind of events, and said, let's predict Chelyabinsk. So here's, and this is what Chelyabinsk object did. Came flat, released the energy at about 20 or 30 kilometers altitude, and generated the shock wave that they experienced on the ground. But they asked, what would happen if the same object, exact same object, just arrived a little bit steeper? Right? I mean, this is a tiny shift in the cosmic scale for this object to come steeper. So he ran this other simulation here with the same code. And as you can see here, the energy was released at maybe around 10 kilometers of altitude. And the shock wave on the ground would have been a lot more powerful and would have caused mass casualties and infrastructure. And I was looking at this and I said, so if we just intercept it a few kilometers higher, we can save the day. What can we do? Can we do that? So we said, well, yeah, we have this capability to shoot rockets, adversary rockets, out of the sky. Why not use this for asteroids? Isn't this a natural question? So we proposed a study, we got some funding. I'm going to skip the majority of it. We did some system engineering, and we took statistics from the fireballs and assumed, what if those were bigger objects? What could we do about those, right? We just plucked out the statistics from the fireballs, which are known. Let's see what we can do. And we put them into those curve fitting, and we said, this is what we have. We tried to find information about the composition of these objects, and did some construction analysis of them. So we focused on S-type. S-type are stony rocks that could act like a bullet passing through the atmosphere. And we blow those kind of bullets up. So we devised the system such that here is the basic sequence. So there is a system that is continuously scanning the sky around you, finding those objects, as soon as possible. And calculating a firing solution on the ground, launching one of those missiles into the incoming object, and try to blow it out at a higher altitude than 10 or 20 kilometers, right? That's what, this is our goal. We talked about what kind of radars exist and might need to be developed for that. We talked about the ground operations. Obviously, this is not a trivial system, but we try to touch it. And the purpose is to say, if you did nothing, this is where the breakup will occur, and you might, result in the destruction of a key installation or a major city. If we can blow it up at a high altitude, essentially what we do is we create a higher surface area, right, which will release the energy higher in the altitude, and the shock wave on the ground will be much, much reduced and save the day over, DC, San Francisco, Oakland. We looked into the entry behavior. We looked at the energy that would have to be put into the object to be able to destroy it. And so we did another study here for the conference in which we took a hybrid code and used a representative object. So the Tel-Aviv object was carried about 23 kilometers. It carried about 18 kilometers of speed and the diameter of about 80 meters. So we picked up an object which is made out of dunite. It's a very solid rock representative of an asteroid. Density of 3 and velocity of 20 kilometers per second. It's kind of worst case, right? Because if the object is made out of rubber pipe, we could probably just disrupt it with this kind of approach. So let's see what we can do with a solid rock.
When you say disrupt, you mean kind of just fragment it?
Fragment it, yeah, and essentially kind of disperse it such that when it enters the atmosphere, each fragment will turn out higher, and there won't be a single pointed shock wave. And we tried like one shot of 1 ton, 5 shots of 1 ton, 1 shot of 5 tons, and then a few shots with explosive, regular explosive, standard explosive. And we saw what's happening here. And here's like an example of a simulation. So with 1 shot, we were able to kind of disrupt a portion of this asteroid, but not completely. So like 1 ton is probably not enough. 1 shot is not enough. So we tried with a 5-ton object. And a 5-ton object completely obliterated the object. So but I don't think we have the technology today to launch a 5-ton object into the asteroid. It's a study, right? It's just scanning the boundaries of what's possible. Just probably 1 more second. And so then we said, well, we can launch a ton, right? This is an existing technology. How about launching a few of these? So it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good job, right? That asteroid did not survive. Now we say, okay, what's that? This is, now we explosive. So let's see what explosive will do to the asteroid. 1 and 2. The pressure escaped outside. Instead of destroying the asteroid, it just escaped outside. It did a good job. We did maybe 3 of them. So let's look at 3 of them.
And this is with different composition?
No, same composition.
Okay.
Same composition. Everything is the same object. And the 3rd one. So you see the 3rd one now disrupt the object. So before we needed either a 5-ton object or 3 or 5 1-ton shots. Now we can do 3 1-ton shots with explosive in the last one. So all of this, of course, ignores difficulties like what happens to the ejector flying out. Is this going to destroy the next one? There's difficult questions, no doubt about it.
these are all just conceptual, high-level conceptual studies that are fun to do. What can I say? Just one. Yeah.
My question was going to be like ejecta in the impact crater. Could you actually get multiple projectiles into the same?
Yeah. So that's
But you mentioned that.
I mentioned, yeah, because it's definitely a good question. You're not first one to ask it. You know, when I talk about it, a few people always, well, what about this kind of ejector kind of thing? And we know that it's a challenge. We didn't take into account. We just look at what basically is possible. Right? So,
can we increase the speed more than 20 kilometers per second to gain more kinetic energy?
well, the 20 kilometers per second is from the asteroid.
Oh,
Right? And we found actually that the interceptor moves a few kilometers per second, but it is the asteroid that runs into the interceptor. It's the opposite of what we are used to do. Right? We launch an interceptor to kill a vehicle, but in this case, it's the asteroid moving so fast, it's going to run into the kill vehicle. Interesting.
You might model this later, but did you try and model deflection as well?
What?
Deflection.
No. You cannot deflect it when it's minutes from entry. There's no point. You need years to deflect an object like that, or many months. We looked at, well, how many systems would we need? So it turns out that if we find the object at about an hour before entry, 59 minutes, we need one system to defend the entire US. One system can protect the entire US if we find the object an hour before entering the atmosphere. That's cool. We're not talking about years and months, we're talking about 1 hour. If we have half an hour, we can still do that. If we have something to the tune of 7 to 25 minutes, we will need 3 systems to defend the US. If we have even less than a few minutes, we would need probably hundreds of those systems scattered around. So obviously this is not useful. We might build a few systems near those installations we are interested. DC, Los Angeles, San Francisco, we just build a few systems near those places that we are interested to protect. So that's and then we went and looked at how many people live in those areas, millions, so it's a good reason why we might want to have it. This kind of object is once or twice a century, so it's in our lifetime. It's a concern to hit us when we are still around. So that's why we looked at that. We looked at those different manifolds and so this is one of the videos. So here is the launch of the rocket. We launched it, and that's the end of the boost phase. Now it's coasting through space on intercept trajectory towards the incoming asteroid from space. So all of this is orbital mechanics. It's physics. What you see here is just pure physics. Then at some point we need a second shot here, just in case. So we have a backup plan, right? And obviously in this simulation we did intercept. Of course we designed it to intercept, but we showed that the physics is there. The physics supports the intercept of the asteroid with an incoming coasting kill vehicle. So it's doable. Physics, the basic physics is there. There's no violation of the basic physics. Engineering is a different story. So I think that's it. Oh, that's a cool one to I think I'm going to kind of stop with this one here. Maybe just 1 minute to show this one, and I think this will pretty much sum it up. So what we've done is that we took all of those fireballs. We took the ephemeris from the fireballs, and we pretended those are objects we would like to defend from. So you see, those fireballs are Chelyabinskis coming in, and we can defend against each and every one of these from a single location in central US if we have an hour of alert. A single system. So all of these are Chelyabinskis. All of these, imagine that they are not little fireballs of several meters, but they are 20 meters objects that are entering the atmosphere and then can damage a big city.
It looks like some aren't being intercepted. Is that just because they're too shallow?
And they're all being intercepted, and it still shows.
Oh, I see. It's like, okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Oh, no, I see.
Yeah, we're being intercepted. What the question here? I think Eric, right?
Yes, I was just wondering if a study like this shows that, at least in theory, it's possible, do you know if anybody's actually trying to build something like this?
No, a couple of people are trying to study this. There is Philip Rubin from Santa Barbara who is looking into similar concept. We talked. I think we got a little bit of funding to study, but building a system like this is a big operation. This is big money. This is hundreds of millions. And you need to do studies to understand the challenges. This is nothing, right? This is just like saying, okay, we on the back of an envelope can do it. But there's many questions, like for example, when you're talking about an object that moves at 20 kilometers per second, the timing of intercepting is humongous, right? Especially if you want to have explosive on board. When do you fuse? How does the fuse work in terms of microseconds? It's very challenging, right? You're not running like dart into a nice big 160 object. You are trying to intercept a tiny little object at a huge speed, very quick. There are challenges, no doubt about it. There's not going to be a system like this can actually operate really well. But it would be nice to do a little bit, wider study to see if there is a showstopper for it, if there a feasibility limit to it. But no, we weren't able to get any more than just very seed money to do that.
I'm going to talk about this with like missile defense, like incoming sort of missile entry vehicle. What's that like 6 or 7 kilometers a second?
You can, I think 5, 6. So, questions with that?
No, the question is, what's the in terms of the window time of intercepting? Like what's the threshold we're allowed to have? Like, are we talking about nanoseconds or femtoseconds?
Nanoseconds, right? Because we want to hit it right.
And for 20 kilometers per second, let's say.
I don't know the exact number. Can go into these numbers, but from discussions, it's very, very precise. Extremely precise, especially terminal guidance and adjustment has to be very precise, very careful.
So for something like this study, what would be the minimum distance from Earth's surface that you'd have to hit it, or be able to hit it to be effective?
We calculated it up to 100 kilometers. So if we can intercept it at 100 kilometers, we are good. And we were able to show that we can hit them up to 1800, which is fantastic, right? I couldn't think about a better outcome when I thought about this idea back then and said, in all cases like 10 or 20 kilometers, that would be good. But that show we can do a lot better than that in house. Another question?
So you kind of just said this, but so you intercepted, but the asteroid still has all the kinetic energy that it had. But you basically triggered the airburst higher, farther from the ground?
Exactly. The idea is to increase its surface area, right? If it comes as a solid object, it acts like a bullet. If you shatter it, increase the surface area, there is more chance that those fragments will disintegrate higher in the atmosphere and a lot less energy will reach up to the ground in one particular location. So,
I don't know if you know this, I was just wondering if the flight dynamics of these objects are comparable or close to the flight dynamics of a hypersonic missile.
Probably.
Probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. It might be a kind of a pathfinder for the hypersonic situation, which is popular. So we just looked at what sort of engagement guidance might be needed here, radar capability might be needed. We figure out that with 6 sites we can defend the whole globe, which is a nice international benefit collaboration. What kind of guidance
readiness algorithms we might need to develop. These are all standard guidance. How can they be adapted to intercept the asteroid with the accuracy that you asked about? All of these are future studies. We weren't able to get any more. It was just a seed money for a nice study. So occasionally we get the seed money for particular study. We're doing one now, so it's kind of more of a side activity for me, except for Artemis.
NASA funded?
Yeah, mostly it's NASA funding, sometimes it's NBA, Missile Defense Agency funding, some of it is Aerospace internal funding. Some of this is my wife. Okay, go work on it over the weekend. Yeah. I think with this I'm done. I'm willing to answer more questions. That's it. I hope that I was able to inspire you to be aware, engage your friends and colleagues, students can approach me if they want. And thank you very much.